Thank you for joining us, Stani. Welcome to Tel Aviv, please. Round of applause. How are you finding it so far? Your first time here?
It's not actually my first time here. I was here a few years ago for I think it was Israel, kind of like a few days of conferencing, and I think it was also a bear market. So I know why I'm here always at a bear market. But something which is very cool is that there's a lot of builders here as of today, but also a few years ago as well. So that's something very fascinating to see that the time itself passes, but and markets change, and the economy changes, and the world changes. But there are always people here that you see that are very passionate about the tech we built, and now even more because there's more reasons to build than decentralized finance. There's exciting DAO ecosystem being already built, but also beyond that, and non-financial applications. So for me, it's kind of one of the main reasons I come to events, because I see people again and again building new things, and that's very inspiring for me as well.
Great. I want to get into the subject of our talk, and just because DeFi and how the industry is essentially in the sector, DeFi sector, is coping with what is going around us. I want to start off with asking you for a definition of what is DeFi for you exactly, because we have the textbook, but we can get maybe a bit more philosophical. What's your take on it? What is it for you?
Yeah, I think it's really good to look into definition of DeFi, because we all kind of like have to go back to basics, and when we're looking into DeFi and what we should build is that, I personally have certain type of characteristics that makes DeFi interesting, and one main thing is that you can interact with protocols in a way where you don't give the custody of your assets. So that's very important, and that pretty much makes all the centralized exchanges kind of like we kind of I don't know what will be the right word, but somehow to evaporate at some point, because when you have control of your funds, and then the second thing is that with decentralized finance and with smart contracts, you can add different kinds of policies of how your assets are then governed, and what is your interaction. So with these policies, for example, every protocol in decentralized finance is a set of rules as a policy, but also there's parameters that you can change as a community. So you have these policies, and they're very hard to be able to change. So either you shouldn't be able to change them at all. So let's say that you are supplying assets to a protocol, 10 years later, they should still be there, and that's the fundamental base layer. Then you might have a policy that you want to have more flexibility. So maybe you found something new, and you found something that's more innovative, and you want to change those policies to reflect the innovation, and then you have some sort of a way of governing the policies with a decentralized governance. So that's another level. So fundamentally, I think in decentralized finance, you should have this concept of ungovernance as a basis, and in some cases it's a journey as well. So you might start with some sort of oversight of a financial primitive that you build, and down the line you basically decentralize the governance, and the end result might be actually that there's no governance at all, which is a good thing. And last thing I want to say is that of the characteristic of DeFi is the transparency. And I think that's very important, especially because as a space and as a technology, decentralized finance is very small. When you compare it to even in the larger crypto space, you compare it to the traditional finance, it's very small. But to actually get DeFi into wider adoption, you have to have many features that actually create better finance. And I usually tell to our team that, and developers that I talk to, is that you always need to build better, faster, stronger. So even if you are using smart contracts, you have to build finance that is just better. And transparency is something that actually accomplishes that goal, and smart contract execution and having those policies. So I would say like non-custodial interactions, transparency, being able to govern, being able to not to govern or govern as a community. And probably there are other definitions, but those are the fundamentally important things to me.
And you mentioned that we're on a journey, right? How far along this journey do you think we are? And you also mentioned that we are going to replace the traditional finance system. Can you explain that a bit more? Like, is it going to be like a slow replacement, or it's just going to happen like that? One is going to collapse overnight, and DeFi is going to be there, mature enough sometime later to take over.
I'm actually very surprised how fast the adoption of many of these protocols happen within the actual community. So whenever there's something new and interesting, it really gets very quick adoption. So if there's a new AMM that gives more to the users or is more efficient, if there's a more efficient lending protocol, these things get adoption very quickly. So users find things very quickly. The adoption actually in more of in the traditional space is very slow, and it's to me it's also kind of extremely slow because there are like fundamental benefits from decentralized finance. What you could get, from institutional perspective, you can transact across globally with counterparties, with policies that can't be bent. You get smart contract execution, you get transparency. So, and you can also maybe even govern those markets amongst your peers. So, you could imagine that something like this is fascinating, but it slowly is getting into the minds of institutional decision makers. And I think there's two things. One is the educational part, obviously, and the other is understanding the technology. Because when you look at traditional finance, a lot of those risks that are there, and there isn't like a zero risk environment, like factually, right? And what's challenging is that in decentralized finance, the risks are we mitigate a lot of risks that appear in centralized finance and traditional finance, but we introduce new ones, and that's the technical risk, for example. And I think wrapping your head around that takes a lot of time. But I think fundamentally what will actually take adoption is when you can quantify the risk in decentralized finance more precisely compared to traditional financial products. And just to give you an example, is that because you have all this transparency, you have visibility to what's on the Aave protocol, what's on how much DAI has been minted by the maker governance, how much of it is let's say in Uniswap, and you have all this visibility. You could actually quantify the risk more precisely, which should mean that then you're operating in an environment where it should be cheaper for you because the risks are more known. And once we get to that stage, then we will start to see adoption because you have more, I would say, kind of like a better environment to operate in terms of risk and reward in financial products.
When you talk about adoption in this current kind of paradigm, you mostly are talking about people that are at least aware of cryptocurrencies and understand the basics. What about the people that, even, our generation younger than us, they may not be that tech savvy, but they may still care about personal finance, but they will be just too scared to kind of try out, DeFi in this current state. Do you think that will kind of slowly be fixed as well? And what do you think it will take to get to those people?
The generation younger?
Well, maybe the generation younger, our generation, but those that are not prepared to kind of sit down and do a ton of research on how to set everything up, how to use the wallets, and get into the slightly more technical side of it, because right now you do have to understand it. I'm kind of more interested about the regular people, that wanna kind of get away from this banking system that's screwing us over in a way, but they just can't wrap their head around it and they can't justify the risk, right? How do we get to those people?
Yeah, I think the younger people are very good at finding things, and especially given how much information there is. But in general, how you would recognize what kind of protocols to use or what stablecoins to use, and it's a fundamentally important question. At this point, there's 5 billion people online, right? So and pretty much the whole financial layer online is Stripe, PayPal, credit card networks, right? And there's a reason, also a technical reason there why we haven't been able to get adoption, because one of the first things even crypto tried to solve is payments, right? So we didn't see adoption there because there's obvious scalability issues, cost issues, and challenges with finality. Well, now I think first time ever we're in a situation where we have this technology. We have ZK rollups, we have optimistic rollups where you can actually transact at very small cost, which is across globally, and reach finality. And this means that first time ever, you could actually use something like stablecoins in settling transactions online directly by interacting with the infrastructure. It's basically smart contracts, or indirectly through libraries or service providers. And there's other things that are helping on that kind of a user perspective, which is account abstraction, for example. But I think that fundamentally what we were trying to do now at Aave and with the Go stablecoin is that we want to push outside of the DeFi space. So finding actually ways into the online usage. And I think it's the perfect moment because now that we have the technology, it's more about building that payment layer. And then the whole DeFi loop starts to close because you have a way to exchange value quite easily now. Many of the AMMs are very convenient to use. They're very easy once you are in the ecosystem. You have basically lending and borrowing, and then you have stablecoins and payments, and you pretty much are having the full circle of financial instruments. And it's totally fine if there I believe that there will be direct access, so you will see a lot of people accessing directly decentralized finance in a non-custodial way, and that will be something that is just going to grow. And probably at some point, everyone will have direct access, but you will still have service providers that are providing access to by using the decentralized infrastructure as well. And that can be, institutions and banks and fintechs.
So one word that jumped at me, stablecoins. You think that's going to be the way that we get to that kind of adoption that we all want? But the current stablecoins, they're mostly quite centralized, aren't they? So we'll need a new generation of stablecoins, and I suppose that's what we need to look forward to, and that's what we need to kind of build, right?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge also is there that, how, the way stablecoins are built today is that the most resilient ones is that you over collateralize with the value versus what you issue as stablecoin. And, if you want to expand that value, let's say natively on in Web3, you have to see more value in the ecosystem. So the current issue is that there is not enough value in the ecosystem that you could just have backing decentralized stablecoins with centralized. And I think that's where we have kind of like a big problem at the moment. But if all this internet infrastructure is going to be based on decentralized systems, I have, I don't think it's going to be a problem in the long term because you have all this value, some ways tokenized into assets that can be used to back stablecoins. Or you have different kinds of ways of reducing that over collateralization as well and optimize. So I think that's the kind of challenge at the moment.
Okay, and getting back to something else you mentioned, now is the time to kind of build, because DeFi was a buzzword, let's say 3 years ago around. Now things have died down since then. NFTs, AI, Web3, we're using other buzzwords. But during that time, do you think that DeFi has developed enough and that it can become a buzzword once again, maybe next year or the year after, once things kind of calm down a little and we begin perhaps another bull run?
I think when you reach a state where things are working and it becomes a bit more boring, that's where that's where you want the technology to be in. And I think DeFi will be a buzz, but I don't know if it's a good term, buzzword, but it will be around for quite a long time because that's one of the first problems that blockchain has been solving. And it's an infrastructure that's going to be used in many applications. So, at Aave, we participate quite a lot in hackathons and we give grants and participate in Gitcoin. And we see a lot of innovation actually and integrations that are not really building new applications on top of the protocol and new financial applications, but they're just integrations into something non-financial. So it's kind of like it becomes a way of plugging a financial layer to your application. And that application can be Web3, it can be Web3 social, it can be some sort of NFT ecosystem application, or can be related to, I don't know, global work, payroll, but also can be any internet application. So I don't know and if also there's a question about whether you should build on DeFi, I think yes, because not just optimizing what we have in the current landscape, but also there are a lot of new things that you could actually come up with, and I think to break more adoption, you need to push the innovation curve further.
So just one last question. So would you say that overall the focus for DeFi right now would be just to push that payments, or as you said, branch out into other sectors and maybe even do something non-financial?
I'm super interested about the having a DeFi infra in layer 2s and in terms of scalability, because that introduces now a different kind of execution environment. So you have lower transaction costs. You also have faster execution. So you could build applications that necessarily you don't want to build on Ethereum, for example, but you can use Ethereum as the last settlement layer. So I think that's where a lot of fascinating stuff happens. And in fact, I met actually people here in this conference that went directly to build to StarkWare because it gives a better execution environment and more realistic of what is happening in traditional finance. If you want to introduce professional traders, they should be able to transact in a high frequency manner, I think, and have those same tools available. So yeah.
So we need to collaborate to build that future together, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a good note to leave on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.